G'day and welcome back to the Sci-Fi Shed. Tonight I want to take a look at Harry Harrison's Deathworld #1. This novel came out in 1960 and it didn't win a Hugo or a Nebula, so we won't be rating this book tonight. But I thought I'd just take a look at it anyway because it's a pretty good book. And I remember I did a book haul a couple of weeks ago and I said that I did read a couple of Harry Harrison books. And it wasn't until after the box opening that I actually started thinking about it. And I thought, you know what? I've actually read quite a few Harry Harrison novels, including The Stainless Steel Rat. So when I picked up a book, I picked up The Stainless Steel Rat, started reading through it, and I thought, hang on, I've read this. And I've also read a couple of the sequels as well. So a bit of a brain blurp. When I did that box opening. But yeah, so Stainless Steel Rat is very famous for that, Harry Harrison, as well as Make Room, that was eventually used as a basis for Soylent Green. Now, Soylent Green, I should actually do a review of Make Room, and maybe a comparison with the movie as well, for those of you who are familiar with Soylent Green. Because the novel is very different to the book. I mean, there's not very much of the book in the movie, if you know what I mean. And they're both great science fiction stories, both in Soylent Green and Make Room, Bake Room. But don't get discouraged if you find yourself not liking the movie, because the book is different. And in some ways, some of the themes are probably more interesting in the movie, let's say. But anyway, this novel, this review is about Deathworld and the #1. So the reason I wanted to come back to this and do this review is that I've also just recently picked up some of the sequels to Deathworld, which I haven't read before. So Deathworld 2, and that cover art just looks absolutely phenomenal. And Deathworld 3. So I want to go through and read the sequels, and I thought I'd reread Deathworld #1 as well. So the novel follows this guy called Jason Denault, who's a gambler, and he's sort of a wanted man in the galaxy because he has psionic abilities. So he can actually predict what cards are going to be dealt or what the roulette wheel is going to do. And he uses that to his advantage, cheating this system, right? But he sort of does it in a moral way where he only cheats casino houses that are actually rigging machinery or cheating their patrons in the actual casino. So he's got sort of this morality view on what he was doing. So there's a lot of people that are after him. So he gets approached by this guy called Kirk, and Kirk makes him this offer, this pretty amazing offer of countless millions of dollars to gamble away and make more money. And it seems to be that Kirk's got some pretty strong evidence that Jason's going to be able to pull off this, gambling of all their money. And he's only given him that one rule criteria, basically win, or if you don't win, we're probably going to kill you. So Jason sort of looks at this, and if he just can't get away from the fact of, hey, I've got all this money that I can gamble away on. And the gambling bug hits him hard, and he takes on the challenge and decides to go through with it. So what happens is Jason actually does go ahead and win because the actual casino was rigging the system, and he sort of pinpointed this, uncovered their masquerade, and they get away. Kirk and Jason get away for these millions of dollars. And what we find is that Jason is pretty annoyed because Kirk has been really the first person that he's ever come in contact with that has actually bested him in a hand-drawn sort of, quick draw, mid-draw kind of thing, right? So he's sort of been bested, and his ego's taken a bit of a battering. And he learns that this Kirk guy belongs to this planet called Pyrus. And Pyrus is known as the world's, the galaxy's most dangerous planet. So this has sort of got Jason intrigued because he thought, I want to know more about this man who can actually best me, and there's nothing he can say or do to persuade me from not going to his own planet, because I've just got to make sense of what's going on here, because this is pretty fascinating, right? So Jason convinces Kirk to take him onto this planet, and this planet is basically the world's most dangerous planet. Every single creature on the planet is looking to kill you, be it plant, animal, anything, right? Everything that's on this planet has literally got one objective, and that's to eradicate man on the planet. So Jason sort of is intrigued by this, and is trying to find ways of why is it everything on this planet out to kill the inhabitants of the planet. And he does a bit of investigation trying to find out whether or not there was something that instigated this, because it actually appears like the planet is at war with humanity, and he's just trying to get to the bottom of it. So he sort of learns through his investigation of this group of people called grubbers, but the villagers, the actual settlement, the people in the settlement don't want to talk to grubbers. They had this very negative view towards them, and they're quite sure that if you even approach one of these guys, one of these grubbers, they're going to absolutely kill you. But Jason gets into a bit of a mix-up with the colonists, and he basically goes and tries to make contact with these grubbers. And what he learns is that these grubbers are actually getting on with the life forms on the planet just that little bit better than what the actual settlers are. And what he learns when he's with these grubbers is that they also seem to have a bit of a psionic ability, or psi ability, where they can actually almost talk to animals, a bit like the horse whisperer. They have this knack of being able to communicate with the animals, and Jason using his own psionic abilities actually learns to communicate to the animals to a certain degree. So equipped with this knowledge, he sets to go back to the actual settlers and share the knowledge, and basically try to get the two communities together and overcome what is actually attacking the planet. So he has a couple of theories, which I won't talk to because it's sort of a bit of a spoiler, but his ultimate aim is to bring these two settlements together with the view of overcoming the war that seems to be happening on the planet when it comes to the inhabitants and the actual animals and plant life on the planet. So look, yeah, a very enjoyable read, and when I was reading through it, it took me right back to astounding magazines, back to that science fiction, pulp science fiction magazines of the era, where these books were so prevalent. And it's no surprise really when I did a bit of research into the book to find that Outstanding Magazine actually published this novel in several different versions, through the monthly releases or weeklies, wherever they were. And so this was actually serialized in Outstanding Magazine, and it actually reads like that. I could very easily see that, a monthly magazine or a fortnightly, weekly magazine where you get the serialized version of this novel. And I know that some people have bagged on this book in the past and called it Pulp Fiction, and it is, right? And I think it's unashamedly so. And for me, that's one of the big appeals of the book, is that Pulp Fiction, the sense of, grabbing those outstanding magazines or weird science or fantastic science or whatever they were called. It takes me right back to that era where, not that I'm that old, mind you, I bought secondhand bookshops, editions of outstanding magazines as a kid. And I remember reading through them and falling in love with this golden age of science fiction. So very reminiscent of that. And it's really no surprise, like I said, given that it was serialized. And I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere, back in time, I was first acquainted with Harry Harrison's Deathworld through Outstanding Magazine. So look, yeah, I really enjoyed the planet, the world building here. And it's not a huge world building, right? It's very Pulp Fiction. It even goes out to say this is the world's most dangerous planet, right? And it's unashamedly so, like I said. But I still like the fact that, the animals and all the wildlife that is encountered in the book was, I thought, just absolutely fantastic. And it was very reminiscent for me. And I wonder, where is it? Silverberg. I keep going back to Silverberg, don't I, when it comes to these contrast. The Man in the Maze. So The Man in the Maze, Robert Silverberg. This was written in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just have a quick look, just to remind myself. Yeah, 1990, right? So 1990, 1960 novel. But I wonder how much of an inspiration Harry Harrison was for when Robert Silverberg wrote The Man in the Maze. Because The Man in the Maze, it's a very similar world. It's a very uninhabitable world. Everything's out to kill you. Everything is dangerous. The man is in a maze, basically, that... I won't go into Robert Silverberg. We'll do a proper review of that book one day. One of the all-time classics, one of my all-time favorite books. But I just wanted to say, sort of tie those books together when it comes to Deathworld and The Man in the Maze, because I did see similarities in, you know, the fact that there's this world that every single living creature on that planet is out to kill you. Every single plant life is out to kill you. Basically anything organic, and I think some even inorganic things were out there to try to kill you, right? Which was very similar to what you find in Robert Silverberg's The Man in the Maze. So even though this is a pulp science fiction novel, and it's very unapologetic in doing so, I think it still talks to some interesting themes. You know, I think it does talk to racial prejudices between the two communities and race. And I think there was an interesting... I wasn't expecting it, let's say. Like, I wasn't expecting to get that level of maturity in the writing. And look, I don't want to say more than that, because it's not like you're not going to, you know, fall in love with this great philosophical novel. It's definitely not that at all. But it does have these themes of racial prejudices and, you know, society having influence over another society by withholding technology. So some interesting themes in there that I think are still, you know, prevalent in our world today, that I wasn't sort of expecting to see in a novel. I mean, that's not what I recall when I first read the novel and when I reread it for this review, getting ready for the sequels, like I said. But look, yeah, I was sort of pleasantly surprised that it goes a little bit deeper than just the pulp fiction elements of it. Look, so what don't I like in a novel? Look, I enjoyed it, right? But it is pulp fiction, right? It is that shoot 'em up, you know, get the guns blazing, fight all these creatures and win the day, right? It is very much like that. But I think you have to be in the mood and you have to understand that's what you're getting into with Deathworld. But like I said, there's some things in the novel that actually go a little bit deeper than that. Now, look, one of the things that I sort of found puzzling with Harry Harrison's Deathworld is the main protagonist in Jason Denault. He's an interesting character, you know. I wouldn't say he's overly deep or philosophical, but he's an interesting character, and sometimes I found it hard to reconcile his actions and his knowledge with his gambling addiction and the way he's sort of portrayed early on in the book, like this criminal who's on the run. And I get the picture. I know that he was painted as this, you know, moral sort of guy. But I don't know. I guess that's what it is, just thinking about it. I think the novel sort of suggests we know Jason Denault better than what we actually do, given that this is the first time we've read about him. So I think there's almost feels like some assumed knowledge of who this Jason guy is, and we don't get much of his backstory. And sometimes I feel like maybe I'm wrong, or maybe I am wrong. Maybe this is not the first time Jason Denault actually appears in one of his novels, and that would explain a lot. So if you know more than I do, please drop me a note, which is probably not hard. Drop me a note in the message below, because maybe that's what I missed, right? Maybe this is not the first time we meet Jason Denault in one of Harry Harrison's books, because it certainly feels that way, right? There's not a lot of backstory, and it just felt like I don't really know this Jason Denault, and I'm finding it hard to reconcile some of his actions to what he's actually doing today and how he goes about trying to reconcile these two groups, right? But look, I'll take that on face value, and please take that on face value as well. It could be because I'm not, you know, hugely versed in Harry Harrison's novels. I have read quite a few in hindsight, but I may be mistaken, and maybe this is not the first appearance that we have with Jason Denault. So yeah, look, a very enjoyable read, Deathworld by Harry Harrison. A very quick read. It just scratches that itch for pulp fiction that I used to really enjoy with Outstanding Magazine. I've already started reading Deathworld #2, which interestingly, seems to have started a lot more philosophically than what Deathworld 1 did. So I'm looking forward to finishing that and potentially doing a review if this one goes well. And Deathworld 3, I'm not quite sure about. I don't know much about that, but there are only some more novels, so I can knock them over in a couple of weeks, both of them. So if you want to see a follow-up, I do highly recommend you drop me a note, and I'll do my best to go through the sequels. So who would I recommend Deathworld to? Now, if you're a fan of Outstanding Magazines, those golden era pulp magazines, pulp science fiction magazines, then I think you know exactly what you're going to get in Harry Harrison's Deathworld. It is that Pulp Fiction, shoot 'em up, sci-fi, almost cowboy type story, right? A cowboy in a science fiction setting, in some ways, is what you get in Harry Harrison's Deathworld. So if you're a fan of those magazines like Fantastic Stories, Astounding Magazines, I think you will enjoy this novel. Also, I think if you read Robert Silverberg, The Man in a Maze, I think there are elements in Deathworld that will appeal to you, especially if you enjoyed The Man in a Maze. Like I said, that planet where everything's out to get you is pretty much the planet that the Man in a Maze had to contend with. So I think, you know, you will enjoy aspects of Harry Harrison's novel here as well. And last but not least, if you're a fan of The Steel Rat by Harry Harrison, it's a very similar kind of vein, similar kind of writing, obviously being the same author. But yeah, I think Harry Harrison fans will also, you won't be disappointed in The Deathworld. It's a great novel. So yes, well, thank you for joining me in the shed. Let me know if you want me to follow up with some of the sequels to give you a bit of a view of what those looks like. But I've been Peter, this has been The Shed, and I'll see you next time in The Shed.